My darlings, I see you, all of you, 12 signs, and one of the most consequential months any of us will live through for a very long time. I want to begin by telling you what August is, structurally, so that you understand why I have built this reading the way I have. On August the 12th, at 47 minutes past 5 in the evening Universal Time, which is 1:45 in the afternoon Eastern, 10:45 in the morning Pacific, and 6:45 in the evening in Central Europe, the moon passes directly across the face of the sun, and the sky goes dark at midday. It is a total solar eclipse. It perfects at 20 degrees and 8 minutes of Leo, and the path of totality crosses Greenland, Iceland, northern Spain, and northeastern Portugal, which makes it the most accessible total eclipse Europe has seen in a generation. But this is not an astronomy video, and I do not want you to care about it because of where you can see it from. Astrologically, it does not matter whether you can see it. It works on your chart whether the sky above your own house is clear or overcast. Here is what matters. A solar eclipse is a new moon. That is what it physically is. The sun and the moon in the same place, at the same degree, in the same sign. Every solar eclipse is a new moon, and this one is the new moon of August, which means that the monthly reset we all live by is, this month, an eclipse. And around it, in the same sign, sit two more bodies. Mercury and Jupiter are both in Leo on the 12th. Sun, Moon, Mercury, Jupiter. 4 planets in one sign on the day the light goes out. My darlings, that is not a normal month. That is a concentration. 3 signs are highlighted more strongly than any others in August, and I am going to take them in a specific order tonight. Gemini first, then Virgo, then Leo, who is standing directly underneath it. And I am going to tell you something at the very end of this reading about the 12th of August itself that almost every astrologer on this platform is going to get wrong. I want to be careful how I say that, because I do not enjoy criticizing colleagues, and I am not doing it for effect. But there is a detail about this particular eclipse that changes what you should actually do on the day, and it is going to be widely ignored. And if you follow the advice you are about to hear everywhere else, you will spend the 12th doing precisely the opposite of what this eclipse is built for. I am saving it for the end because it will make far more sense once you have heard all 3 signs. But I will tell you now that it concerns the difference between the 2 ends of a particular axis. And if you already know what the south node is, you may work it out before I say it. I am Madame Aurora, 35 years studying the stars from my office in Manhattan, and before I go to Gemini, let me give you the shape of the whole month, because there are several dates that matter, and I would rather you had them written down than have to remember them. August opens gently, which is worth knowing because it does not stay that way. On the 6th, Venus enters Libra. Venus rules Libra, which means she is in her own home, comfortable, at full strength, and she stays there until the 10th of September. This is the single kindest transit of the month, and it runs underneath everything else. Relationships soften. Negotiations go better than they should. Aesthetic and financial matters both benefit. If you have something delicate to repair with a person, the first half of August is the most favorable window you will get for a while. Around the 9th, Mercury joins the Sun in Leo, and communication takes on warmth and performance and a certain amount of theater. On the 11th, Mars enters Cancer, where it is not entirely comfortable. Mars in Cancer does not fight for territory. It fights for what it loves, which sounds nicer than it is, because it means the conflicts of the second half of August tend to be protective rather than ambitious. Notice what you find yourself defending fiercely this month. It will tell you something. And then the 12th, the eclipse, the new moon, the 4 planets in Leo. This is the hinge of the month, and I will come back to it repeatedly. On the 15th, 3 days later, Mercury conjoins Jupiter at 10 degrees of Leo. This is the second wave, and it is not a minor aspect. Mercury is the planet of the message, and Jupiter is the planet of expansion, and they meet exactly in the same sign the eclipse just detonated in. If the 12th blows the door open, the 15th is what walks through it. On the 17th, 2 things at once. Mars in Cancer squares Neptune, which is the fogged, deflated, cannot-get-moving aspect of the month, and I would not schedule anything demanding on that day. And Venus in Libra sextiles Jupiter in Leo at 10 degrees each, which is genuinely lovely, and which most people will not notice because it is quiet. On the 22nd, the Sun conjoins the South Node at the very last degree of Leo, and Virgo season begins. On the 25th, Mercury does the same. Those two dates are the closing of the Leo chapter, and I will explain their significance when I get to Leo. On the 27th, Mercury cazimi at 4 degrees of Virgo. Cazimi means the planet is in the heart of the Sun, which is the single clearest, most concentrated point in any Mercury cycle. It is a day of unusual mental clarity, and it falls, this month, in Virgo. And on the 27th into the 28th, depending on where you are, a partial lunar eclipse at 4 degrees and 53 minutes of Pisces. The full moon, the second eclipse of the month, and it lands on a completely different axis from the first, which is why the end of August feels nothing like the middle of it. And then, on the 31st, the month closes with Jupiter at 13 degrees of Leo, forming a trine to Saturn, retrograde, at 13 degrees of Aries. Jupiter and Saturn in agreement. Expansion and structure, for once, not arguing. I will come back to this date at the very end because it is the other half of something. Write those down. The 6th, the 11th, the 12th, the 15th, the 17th, the 22nd, the 27th, the 28th, and the 31st. And before I go to the signs, let me say one thing about how eclipses actually behave, because a great deal of nonsense is spoken about them and I would rather you had the accurate version. An eclipse is not a day. That is the first and most important thing. People treat the 12th of August as an event that occurs on the 12th of August and is then finished, and that is not how they work. An eclipse opens a corridor. The effects unfold over roughly 6 months, and they unfold in stages, as later transits cross the same degree and reactivate it. What happens on the day itself is very often small, or ambiguous, or nothing at all, and the significance becomes visible in October, or in December, or in February. So if the 12th passes quietly for you, my darlings, do not conclude that you were skipped. A great many of the most consequential eclipses in the lives of my clients passed without incident on the day and revealed themselves 11 weeks later. The second thing is that eclipses are personal by degree. This one perfects at 20 degrees of Leo, which means anyone with a planet or an angle between roughly 15 and 25 degrees of the fixed signs, Leo, Aquarius, Taurus, and Scorpio, receives it far more directly than anybody else. If you know your chart, look there. If you do not, the sun sign guidance I am about to give you is a reasonable approximation. And the third thing is that eclipses do not negotiate. Ordinary transits present options. Eclipses present outcomes. Whatever has been half decided, half ended, or half avoided in the area an eclipse touches tends to get decided, ended, or arrived at whether or not you were ready. That is why they are the most respected events in the astrological calendar, and why I am giving this one an hour of your evening. Now let us begin. Let us go to Gemini. My darling Gemini, August lands on the house your entire sign was built around. The eclipse on the 12th falls in your third house, 20 degrees of Leo, in the house of voice, words, ideas, communication, learning, teaching, and the whole apparatus of how what is inside you gets out into the world. That is your natural house. Gemini is the sign of the third house, and an eclipse there does not adjust things. It resets them. And it is not arriving alone. Jupiter has been sitting in your third house since the end of June, beginning 13 months of expansion in exactly this area. Mercury, your own ruling planet, is there for the eclipse as well. So on the 12th, you have the Sun, the Moon, your ruler, and the largest planet in the solar system, all in the house your sign is named for, on the day the light goes out. My darling, I have been doing this a long time, and I want to be plain with you. For any Gemini whose life touches words, voice, ideas, writing, teaching, content, or communication of any kind, this is the most significant month of your decade for that part of your life. Not the most pleasant necessarily, the most significant. Let me tell you what it actually looks like. The 12th resets. Something in how you communicate, or in what you are communicating, or in the platform through which you do it, reaches a point of no return. For some of you, that is a launch. For some, it is an ending, a project, or a voice, or a role you have been performing that closes on or around that date. Eclipses do both, and which one it is for you depends on what has already been building since Jupiter arrived at the end of June. Then the 15th arrives, and this is the date I would circle if I were you. Mercury conjunct Jupiter, both in your third house, 3 days after the eclipse cracked it open. Your ruling planet meeting the planet of expansion in the house of your voice. That is the single most favorable day of your year for putting something out, sending something, saying something, or asking for something that involves your words. If you have a proposal in a drafts folder, that is the week. If you have been circling a conversation about rates or terms, that is the week. If you have been outlining something for years and refining rather than launching, and my darling, a great many Geminis are doing exactly that, then the 11 days between the 12th and the 22nd are the window, and there is not going to be another one like it for a very long time. But the third house is not only the public voice, and I want to speak to those of you for whom this is not professional at all. The third house also governs siblings, neighbors, the immediate environment, short journeys, and the everyday exchanges that make up most of a life. For some of you, the eclipse arrives there instead. A relationship with a sibling changes. A conversation you have been avoiding with someone close by finally happens. Something in your immediate surroundings shifts, and it changes the texture of your ordinary days more than any career development would. Now let me give you the rest of your August, because the month does not end on the 15th. Mars entered Cancer on the 11th, and Cancer is your second house of money and personal resources. Mars there for the rest of the month means you will be defending something financial. Not pursuing it, defending it. Watch for a tendency to fight about money in a way that is really about security, because Mars in Cancer does not argue about the number, it argues about the feeling underneath the number. Venus in Libra from the 6th sits in your 5th house of romance, creativity, and pleasure, and she is at full strength there. That is a genuinely good transit for you, and on the 17th she sextiles Jupiter in your 3rd, which links your creative life to your voice in a way that is quiet and easy, and which I would use if I were you. Whatever you make in the second half of August, make it for pleasure first. And then the 28th, which is the date I most want Geminis to notice, because almost nobody will tell you about it. The lunar eclipse at 4 degrees of Pisces falls in your 10th house. Your career, your public standing, the thing you are known for. My darling, that is not a small placement. A full moon eclipse in the 10th house tends to bring things to a head professionally, and it lands 16 days after an eclipse in your 3rd house of voice. Do you see the shape of that? Your August begins with a reset in what you say and ends with a culmination in what you are publicly known for. Those two are connected. What you launch, close, or claim around the 12th is what your professional reputation is reorganizing around by the 28th. I would also say plainly that Pisces is a mutable sign, and so is yours, which means Geminis born in the first 10 days of June, roughly the first week and a half, feel the lunar eclipse considerably more sharply than the rest of you. Now, my darling Gemini, here is what I would ask of you specifically this month. Let me first give you the rest of your life dimensions briefly, because the 3rd house is not the whole of your August. In money, Mars in your 2nd house for the rest of the month, and the eclipse ruler connecting voice to income, means that whatever you are paid for in the second half of August is more likely than usual to be paid for your words specifically. If you have been undercharging, and Geminis chronically do because your sign produces work quickly and mistakes speed for lesser value, the week of the 15th is when to correct it. In love, Venus in Libra in your 5th house from the 6th is one of the better romantic transits of your year, and it is at its best before the eclipse rather than after. If you are single, the first 11 days of August are the light-hearted, genuinely enjoyable stretch. If you are partnered, this is a good window for doing something impractical together. And watch the 17th, when Venus sextiles Jupiter, which is a soft and easy day that will pass unnoticed unless you use it. In health and daily life, Mars square Neptune on the 17th is the one day in August I would clear if you can. Low energy, poor judgment about effort, a tendency to mistake exhaustion for failure. Do not schedule anything demanding and do not make decisions about your capacity on that day. In family and the immediate world, the 3rd house governs siblings and neighbors, so if the eclipse does not land professionally for you, look there. Something in a sibling relationship or in your immediate surroundings resets in August, and for a good number of you, that will turn out to have been the actual story of the month. And now the instruction, which is the hardest one I can give your sign. Choose one thing. That is the whole instruction, and it is the hardest one I can give your sign. Jupiter in your third house for 13 months will generate ideas at a rate that would exhaust any other sign, and the shadow of Jupiter in Gemini's own house is not scarcity, it is scatter. The Geminis who arrive at the end of August having poured 6 weeks into one or two things will be in a completely different position by the winter than the Geminis who touched 9. And one more thing, and I will come back to it at the end. Something in your third house is going to be cleared out this month. Not only added. Notice what stops. Let me tell you about a Gemini client of mine, because the pattern is worth having. She came to me 12 years ago, the last time Jupiter passed through her third house, which is to say, the last time this transit occurred in her life. She had been a ghostwriter for 19 years, extremely successful, entirely invisible, writing under other people's names for executives whose books you would recognize. She had been outlining something under her own name for 3 years, and had not launched it. She said to me, and I have quoted this to Geminis ever since, I keep telling myself I am preparing, and I am beginning to suspect I am hiding. What she did that August was not dramatic. She launched something small, badly, 3 weeks later than she had planned, with a platform she was not happy with and a first piece she described to me afterward as embarrassing. 400 people saw it in the first week, most of them people she already knew. 12 years on, she has published 5 books under her own name and earned several times what she earned as a ghostwriter, and when we spoke last month, she told me the thing that mattered was not the launch. It was that the launch made her stop being someone who was preparing. She said, I did not become a writer when it went well. I became a writer the day I sent something imperfect. My darling Gemini, this month is that shape for a great many of you. The eclipse will not reward the polished thing that is not out yet. It rewards motion. Now, before I move to Virgo, my darlings, let me pause for just a moment. If what I have said about Gemini is landing, tap that little like button below this video. It is a small gesture, and it does something real, which is tell YouTube to carry this to more people who are about to walk into the most concentrated month of their year without knowing it. And if you are not yet subscribed, this is the moment, because we have 2 signs left, and the third one is standing directly underneath the eclipse. Now let me speak to Virgo. My darling Virgo, your August has a shape that almost nobody else in the zodiac gets, and I want to describe it properly because it is genuinely unusual. Your month is in 2 completely separate halves, and the line between them is sharp. The first half belongs to your 12th house. The eclipse on the 12th, at 20 degrees of Leo, falls in the house immediately behind your own sign. The 12th house is rest, retreat, the inner life, the unconscious, and everything that happens quietly and privately before it becomes visible to anyone. It is the house of not doing, and it is the exact opposite pole of the house your sign is built around. Jupiter has been sitting there since the end of June. Mercury, your own ruler, is there for the eclipse. So on the 12th, you have 4 bodies gathered in the least visible sector of your entire chart, on the day the light goes out. And here is what that means practically, my darling, and I want to say it carefully because it is easy to hear as bad news and it is not. Nothing is going to look like it is happening to you in the first 3 weeks of August. That is the design. Not a delay, not a stall, not a sign that you have been passed over while other signs are having their moment. The 12th house does its work invisibly by definition. A 4-planet gathering there is not less powerful than a 4-planet gathering anywhere else. It is simply not observable, including by you. I know precisely how your sign will interpret this. You will look at the middle of August and conclude that nothing came of it. And then in the autumn something will surface that has clearly been assembling since the 12th, and you will not be able to point to a single day where it happened. So let me tell you what to watch for instead, since the ordinary markers will not be available. Watch your sleep. 12th house activity shows up there before it shows up anywhere else, and for your sign in particular, which carries everything in the nervous system, the 12th house is not abstract at all. Some of you will sleep differently in the days around the eclipse. Some will dream vividly for the first time in years. Some will simply find that the 4 in the morning waking that has been running for months stops, without explanation, and does not resume. Watch what you stop wanting to do. The 12th house releases. A commitment, a habit, an obligation, a way of spending your Tuesday evenings that you have not questioned in years, may quietly lose its hold in the middle of this month, and your sign will experience that as guilt before it experiences it as freedom. And watch for something you have kept private becoming, for the first time, sayable. not necessarily said, sayable. Then, on the 15th, Mercury conjoins Jupiter in the same house, your ruling planet meeting Jupiter in your house of the hidden and the restorative. For Gemini, that same conjunction is a launch date. For you, it is the opposite. It is the day something internal clarifies. If you have been circling a private decision, one you have not discussed with anybody, the 15th is when it resolves in you, and it may be weeks before it becomes an action. And then the second half of your month arrives and everything changes. On the 22nd, the Sun leaves Leo and enters your sign. Virgo season, your solar return period, the Sun in your own sign for a month, which happens once a year and which is, for every sign, the annual reset of the whole self. But this year it is more than that, and I want you to mark the 27th in particular. On the 27th, Mercury is cazimi at 4 degrees of Virgo. Cazimi means in the heart of the sun. It is the exact midpoint of the entire Mercury cycle, the single clearest point in it, and it is the moment when the mind is least cluttered and most precise. And this one occurs in your own sign, in your own first house, 4 days after your season begins. My darling, that is your day. If I could give one Virgo one day in the whole of August, that is the one I would give. It is the day to make the decision, write the thing, have the conversation, or commit to the course that the previous 3 weeks of invisible 12th house work has been quietly assembling. Everything before the 22nd is preparation. The 27th is when the preparation becomes speech. And then on the 28th, one day later, the lunar eclipse at 4 degrees of Pisces falls in your 7th house of partnership. Pisces is your opposite sign. That eclipse is exactly across from you, and it comes to a head the day after your clearest day of the year. A partnership matter culminates. For some of you, that is romantic. For some, it is a business partner, a collaborator, a person you are formally bound to. For some, it is the discovery that a relationship has been operating on terms you agreed to a long time ago and have outgrown. And I want to note, as I did for Gemini, that Pisces and Virgo are both mutable, which means Virgos born in the first 10 days of September feel this lunar eclipse considerably more sharply than the rest. The rest of your August, briefly, Venus in Libra from the 6th sits in your 2nd house, of money, values, and what you consider your self-worth. And she is at full strength there, which favors income conversations, and, more importantly for your sign, favors actually asking. Mars in Cancer from the 11th sits in your 11th house of groups and friendships, and you may find yourself defending someone in a community setting, or discovering that you are less willing to keep the peace in a group than you were. And I want to add one practical note about the first half of your month, because your sign will want a specification, and I would rather give you one than leave you improvising. If nothing is visibly happening between the 6th and the 22nd, here is what to do with those weeks. Do less than you think you should. Sleep more than is respectable. Keep a small note of anything that surfaces, in dreams or otherwise, without interpreting it, because your sign will build a complete explanatory structure on a single fragment within 4 minutes and then defend the structure. Record, do not conclude, and decline one thing, 1. Something you would ordinarily absorb without thinking about it, that is not actually yours, that somebody else could perfectly well handle. Decline it in the first half of August, and notice that the world continues. That single act does more for a 12th house transit than any ritual I could design, because the 12th house cannot do its work in a life that is completely full, and the space you make by declining one thing is the space the transit actually operates in. Now, my darling Virgo, here is what I would ask of you this month, and it will be difficult. Do not fill the first 3 weeks. Your sign, when a period arrives in which nothing appears to be happening, will find something to do with it, and the something will be legitimate, and will be unimpeachable, and will fill exactly the space the 12th house needed in order to work. If August feels empty in the middle, my darling, that emptiness is the transit. It is not a gap in the transit. And one more thing, which I will return to at the end. Notice what leaves during the first half of this month. Something will. Pause with me for a moment, my darlings, because we have one sign left, and it is the one standing directly underneath the eclipse. Before I go there, I want you to do something, and it will take 20 seconds. Whatever your sign, think about the area of your life I have just described for it. Gemini, your voice. Virgo, your rest and your inner life. Leo, your own person. And if you are one of the other 9, wait for your section, which is coming. Now ask yourself one question. In that area, what has been half decided for longer than it should have been? Not what you want. What has been sitting at 50%, neither committed to nor abandoned, for months or years? Hold whatever came to mind. That is almost certainly what this eclipse is going to reach for, because that is what eclipses do. They finish half-decided things, and I am going to ask you for it at the end of this video, so keep it somewhere. If this reading is bringing you something tonight, tap that like button. It genuinely does something, which is tell YouTube that this matters to real people, and it carries it to somebody who is going to walk into the 12th of August without knowing what it is. And subscribe with the bell on if you have not, because I will be back before the eclipse itself with a day-by-day breakdown of that week. Now let me speak to Leo. My darling Leo, you are standing directly underneath it. Everything I have described tonight, the 4 bodies, the darkness at midday, the 20 degrees, is happening in your own sign, not in a house adjacent to you, not in a sector of your chart, in Leo, on you. Let me lay it out properly, because I want you to understand the size of it before I say anything else. Jupiter entered your sign at the end of June, and is there for 13 months. That is your Jupiter return year, which arrives once every 12 years and is the most expansive of every 12. Mercury is in Leo through the middle of the month. The Sun is in Leo until the 22nd, which is ordinary and annual and yours. And on the 12th, the Moon joins all of them at 20 degrees, and the Sun goes dark. 4 bodies in your sign. In your first house, the house of your body, your presence, your name, and how you appear to the world before you have said anything. There is no other sign in the zodiac receiving this in 2026. That is not a figure of speech. Look at the other 11 charts and the configuration does not exist. Let me tell you what it actually does. The first house eclipse is the most personal placement an eclipse can have. It is not about your career or your relationships or your money, although it will affect all 3 eventually. It is about you, the version of yourself you have been presenting, the identity you have been operating under, and a solar eclipse there resets it, which is the correct word and not a dramatic one, because a reset involves something ending as well as something beginning. For some of you, this is visible and physical. Leos very frequently change their appearance around a first house eclipse, and I mention it because it happens with a regularity that surprises even me. Hair, clothing, the way you carry yourself. It is not vanity. The first house is the body, and the eclipse is asking for a change in the container. For some, it is a role, the thing people call you when they describe you, what you are known as. Something in that description stops being accurate in August, and the correction takes months rather than days. For some, it is recognition arriving. Jupiter in your first house for 13 months is one of the strongest visibility transits available in astrology, and the eclipse is the concentrated point of it. Opportunities arrive. People look at you differently. Rooms respond to you differently, and you will notice it before you can explain it. And for some of you, and I say this having watched Leo eclipses for 35 years, the eclipse arrives as the ending of a performance. Not a public one, the private one. The version of yourself you constructed a long time ago because it was well received, and which has been running ever since, and which has become considerably more tiring than you let anybody see. Then the 15th. Mercury conjunct Jupiter at 10 degrees of Leo, still in your first house, 3 days after the eclipse. For Gemini, that is a launch, and for Virgo, it is a private clarification. For you, it is the second wave of visibility landing directly on your own person. If something is going to be said about you, offered to you, or asked of you this month, the week of the 15th is when. And then, my darling, the month begins to close the Leo chapter, and this is the part almost nobody will explain to you properly. On the 22nd, the Sun conjoins the South Node at the very last degree of Leo, 29 degrees and 49 minutes, and then leaves your sign. On the 25th, Mercury does the same at essentially the same degree. The final degree of a sign is called the anaretic degree, and it carries a specific quality. It is the last possible moment. Whatever has not been dealt with in that sign gets one final, compressed presentation before the door closes. And here both the Sun and your visiting ruler in residence pass over the South Node on their way out. Those 2 dates, the 22nd and the 25th, are the closing of your Leo season, and they will feel like an exhale for some of you, and like a small grief for others, and both are correct. The rest of your August. Venus in Libra from the 6th sits in your 3rd house of communication, which softens how you speak, and is genuinely useful in the week before the eclipse if you have anything difficult to say. Mars entered Cancer on the 11th and sits in your 12th house for the rest of the month, which is Mars in the least comfortable position it occupies in any chart. Expect to be more tired than the month appears to justify, and expect some irritation with no identifiable target. That is Mars operating behind the curtain, and it is one of the reasons the days immediately after the eclipse may feel flatter than you would expect given everything else. The lunar eclipse on the 28th falls in your 8th house, which governs shared resources, joint finances, debt, inheritance, intimacy, and the things two people hold between them. Something concludes there at the end of the month, and it will be more private than anything else that happens to you in August. And then the 31st, Jupiter in your sign trines Saturn in Aries. Your expansion, in agreement with structure, on the final day of the month. Now, my darling Leo, here is what I would ask of you. But first the rest of your dimensions, briefly, because the 1st house colors everything, and I want you to know where it lands. In career. Jupiter in your 1st house is not a career transit in the ordinary sense. It does not promote you. It makes you visible. And visibility converts into opportunity through other people noticing rather than through you applying. That means the correct professional strategy for you in August is presence rather than pursuit. Be in rooms. Say yes to things that put you in front of people. The offers of this period arrive because somebody saw you, not because you sent something. In love. Venus in your 3rd house softens communication and favors saying the difficult thing gently in the run-up to the 12th. But the more significant point is this. A 1st house eclipse changes how you appear, and the people closest to you will feel that before they can name it. If you are partnered, expect your partner to notice a change in you before you have described one. If you are single, the 2nd half of August is when the version of you that emerges from this eclipse starts attracting differently, and it will attract a different kind of person than the version before it did. In money. The 8th house lunar eclipse on the 28th is your financial event this month, and it concerns shared money rather than your own. A joint account, a contract, a debt, an inheritance, something held between you and one other person. Read the paperwork. In health and energy. Mars in your 12th house from the 11th onward is the reason some of you will feel unaccountably flat in the 2nd half of the month, in a period that on paper should be triumphant. That is not the eclipse failing. That is Mars operating behind the curtain. Rest more than the month seems to warrant. And now the instruction. Do not deflect. That is the whole instruction. Everything I have described will arrive in some form, and the entire question is whether you can receive it without immediately minimizing it, crediting somebody else, or making yourself smaller so that the people around you are more comfortable with your expansion. Your sign is far better at giving light than at standing in it, and this month is going to test that in a way you will not be able to talk your way around. Let me be practical about what deflection actually looks like, because your sign will agree with me in principle and then do it anyway within a fortnight. It looks like adding a qualifier. Somebody praises the thing, and you immediately supply the context that makes it smaller. It was mostly the team. It was lucky timing. It is not as impressive as it sounds. Every one of those sentences is factually defensible, and every one of them is a refusal. It looks like changing the subject within 8 seconds. You will not notice yourself doing this. Ask somebody who knows you well, and they will have noticed. It looks like immediately paying for it. An offer arrives, and within a week, you have taken on something additional, unrelated, unasked for, to balance the books. Leos do this less than Virgos do, but you do it, and in your case, it usually takes the form of over-delivering on the very thing you were just praised for. And it looks like the quietest version, which is not telling anybody. Something genuinely good happens in August, and you simply do not mention it to anyone, and you tell yourself you are being modest, and what is actually happening is that you do not want to be watched wanting it. So here is the exercise, and it is small and it is genuinely difficult. When something arrives this month, say thank you, and then stop talking. Do not add the qualifier. Let the silence run slightly too long. You will find it physically uncomfortable, and that discomfort is the entire transit in miniature. Let me tell you about a Leo client of mine, because the shape of it is instructive. She came to me 19 years ago, the last time the South Node was in Leo, which is to say, the last time this particular configuration touched her sign. She was 41 and she was a senior creative director who had been passed over for partner 3 times, and the third time she came to me genuinely considering whether she had wasted a decade. I told her something that afternoon that I would say to a great many of you this month. I said, the South Node arriving in your sign is not the universe rewarding you inside the system that has been holding you small. It is the universe removing your ability to keep waiting inside it. She did not resign that week, which is the part people always expect, and which almost never happens. What she did was start being visible outside the firm. She accepted speaking invitations she had been declining for years. She wrote under her own name for the first time. She stopped being the person who built other people's reputations quietly. Within a year, she had 3 offers. She took the strongest. 6 years later, she had founded her own firm, and she runs it still. She telephoned me quite recently, my darlings, because she is now 19 years further on, and the nodes have come back round to where they were, and she is facing a decision of a completely different size. I will not describe it, but she said something I want you to have. She said, the thing I did not understand at 41 was that nobody was going to give me permission, and the reason I kept waiting was that being given it would have meant I had not taken it. That is the Leo eclipse, my darling. In one sentence, from somebody who has already lived one. And the last thing, which I will now explain fully, because I have said it to all 3 signs tonight, and you have probably noticed. But first, my darlings, let me speak to the other 9 signs, because I do not believe in a monthly reading that addresses a quarter of the zodiac and leaves everybody else standing outside the door. And an eclipse of this size touches every chart. Where 20 degrees of Leo falls in your chart, something switches on this month, whether or not your sun sign is one of the 3 I have highlighted. Aries. The eclipse lands in your 5th house of joy, romance, creativity, children, and play. Of every sign in the zodiac, this is arguably the pleasantest placement for it. Something in your capacity to enjoy your own life resets in August, and given that Saturn has been sitting in your own sign making you responsible for a long stretch now, you have earned it. Watch the 31st in particular, when Jupiter trines that same Saturn. That is your date this month. Taurus. The eclipse falls in your 4th house of home, family, and foundation, and it is a fixed sign eclipse, which means Taurus is one of the 4 signs feeling this most personally, particularly if you were born around the middle of your sign. Something in your living situation, your family arrangement, or your sense of where home actually is, comes to a point in August. Move, repair, arrival, departure. The 4th house does not deal in metaphors. Cancer. The eclipse falls in your 2nd house of money and personal resources. Jupiter passed through your sign until the end of June and has now moved into your money house, which is a genuinely favorable placement, and the eclipse concentrates it. Mars entering your own sign on the 11th gives you more drive than you have had in 2 years. Use it in the 2nd half of the month rather than the 1st. Libra. The eclipse falls in your 11th house of community, friendships, and networks. Something in a group you belong to reorganizes. And Venus, your ruler, enters your own sign on the 6th and stays through early September, which is your single best transit of the year. You are more persuasive, more magnetic, and more able to ask for things in August than at any other point in 2026. Do not waste it. Scorpio. The eclipse falls in your 10th house of career and public standing, which is the most professionally significant placement available. You are also a fixed sign, so this one is personal for you. Something in your career comes to a point in the middle of August, and unlike most signs, yours tends to know in advance, so if you have already sensed it, you were correct. Sagittarius. The eclipse falls in your 9th house, your own natural house, of expertise, teaching, publishing, travel, and the wider view. Jupiter, your ruler, is there for 13 months. This is your platform year, and August is its most concentrated point. Send the proposal, accept the international opportunity, claim the expertise. Capricorn. The eclipse falls in your 8th house of joint finances, shared resources, and other people's money. Not romantic, extremely consequential. Contracts, inheritances, debts, and the financial architecture between you and somebody else. Read carefully in August. Your sign is the best in the zodiac at that, and this is the month to use it. Aquarius. The The eclipse falls in your seventh house of partnership, directly opposite your own sign, and you are the other end of this entire eclipse axis. That is not a minor position. When an eclipse perfects in Leo, Aquarius is standing directly across from it, and the partnership house is where you feel it. Something in a one-to-one relationship comes to a head. You are also a fixed sign, so this is personal for you, and the North Node in your own sign means the 18 months ahead are yours regardless. Pisces. The eclipse on the 12th falls in your 6th house of work, routine, and health, which is quietly significant. But the one to mark is the 28th, because the lunar eclipse at 4 degrees of Pisces lands in your own sign, in your 1st house. That is a personal eclipse, and it belongs to you, and if you were born in the first 10 days of March, it is directly on you. The end of August is your part of this month, not the middle. Now, my darlings, let me give you the thing I have been saving, because it applies to all 12 of you, and it is the most useful thing I know about August the 12th. Over the next few weeks, you are going to be told, in a great many videos and a great many articles, that the 12th of August is a new moon, and that you should therefore set intentions on it. Write your list, state your wishes, plant your seeds for the 6 months ahead. My darlings, please do not. Let me explain why, and it is not superstition, it is structure. Every eclipse occurs at one of the 2 lunar nodes. That is what makes it an eclipse, rather than an ordinary lunation. And there are 2 nodes, and they do opposite things. The North Node is the point of increase, of hunger, of intake, of the new thing arriving. An eclipse on the North Node is genuinely a planting eclipse, and setting intentions on one is appropriate and effective. The South Node is the point of release, of completion, of letting go, of what has been carried far enough. An eclipse on the South Node does not plant, it subtracts. The eclipse on the 12th of August is on the South Node. It is the second eclipse in a set falling along the Leo and Aquarius axis, running from February of this year through to January of 2028, and the Leo end of that axis is the South Node end. And beyond that, on the 22nd, the Sun conjoins the South Node exactly at the final degree of Leo, and on the 25th, Mercury does the same. The entire back half of this month is the South Node closing the Leo chapter. So this new moon is not asking what you want, it is asking what you are carrying that you do not need to carry into the next 18 months. And here is why it matters practically rather than philosophically, and this is the part I most want you to have. A person who spends the 12th of August writing a list of things she wants is asking the sky for intake during the one lunation of the year specifically designed for release. And the usual outcome is not disaster. It is simply that nothing happens, and she concludes that eclipses do not work, or that she does not, and both conclusions are wrong. Whereas a person who spends the 12th naming what she is putting down is working with the mechanism rather than against it. And now look at the last date on my list, the 31st of August, Jupiter trine Saturn. Expansion in agreement with structure, at 13 degrees, 19 days after the eclipse. My darlings, that is the pairing. That is the design of the whole month, and it is why I asked you to write both dates down at the beginning. The 12th subtracts. The 31st is when the space that subtraction created gets a structure put into it. Jupiter cannot expand into a full room, and Saturn cannot build without ground that has been cleared. 19 days apart, on purpose. So here is what I would actually have you do, and it takes 20 minutes and costs nothing. On the 12th of August, in the evening after the eclipse has perfected wherever you are, find a quiet space. Light a gold candle for the sun, and a silver or white one for the moon. And if you have neither, my darlings, this works entirely without them, because the objects have never been the mechanism. Take 7 slow breaths, longer on the exhale than the inhale. Then write, at the top of a page, the date and one sentence. The sentence is, what I am no longer carrying into the next 18 months. And then answer it. Not a long list, 3 items at most, and be specific rather than noble. Not, I release fear, which means nothing and commits you to nothing. Name the actual thing, the role you have been performing, the obligation that stopped being yours 2 years ago, the version of a relationship that ended before the relationship did, the standard you inherited from somebody who is no longer alive to enforce it. 3 items. Write the date. Fold it and put it away. And then, on the 31st of August, when Jupiter and Saturn come into agreement, take it out and read it, and write underneath one line, what has come into the space. You may find nothing has yet, and that is entirely normal, because an eclipse works over 6 months and not 19 days. Write nothing yet and date it, but do the reading, because the act of checking is what teaches you the rhythm, and once you have watched the mechanism work once, you will never again spend an eclipse writing a wish list. My darlings, before I let you go, 3 small things. 1. If any part of this reading gave you something tonight, if the shape of the month is clearer than it was an hour ago, if you understood why your sign is highlighted or why it is not, tap that like button. It is the simplest way to tell YouTube to carry this to somebody who is walking into the 12th of August without knowing what it is. And there are a great many of them, and this one matters more than most. 2. Subscribe and turn on the bell, because I will be back before the 12th with a day-by-day breakdown of the eclipse week itself, and after the 28th with the Pisces lunar eclipse, which almost nobody is going to cover properly. If you become a member of this channel, readings reach you before they are published, and you and I actually speak, because I read member comments first, and I answer there more often and more personally than I am able to anywhere else. 3. And this is the one I care about most. Write to me in the comments, and I want the specific thing rather than the general thing. Not your sign alone, which tells me nothing and tells the next person nothing either. Tell me your sign and one of your 3. One thing you are putting down on the 12th. One line. I read every single comment, truly, and I want to tell you why this particular comment section is going to matter. Everyone else's is going to be full of wishes. Ours is going to be full of the other thing, and there is a Gemini or a Virgo or a Leo who is going to scroll it on the 11th of August, having written a wish list she was not sure about, and read 14 strangers naming what they are setting down instead, and she is going to tear up the list and start again. That is worth more than anything I said in the last hour. And if this reading gave you something and you ever want to say thank you more directly, a super thanks is never expected and always felt, and it is a genuine part of how I keep making these readings as carefully as I make them. If you know a Gemini, a Virgo, or a Leo who is about to walk into the biggest month of their year without knowing it, send this to them tonight. You may not realize how much a single share matters. It is how this work finds the person who needs it. Thank you, my darlings. This community has become something I genuinely did not expect when I began. The 6th, the 11th, the 12th, the 15th, the 17th, the 22nd, the 27th, the 28th, the 31st. Write them down. Gemini, the reset lands in your voice, and the 15th is your day. Virgo, the first 3 weeks are invisible on purpose, and the 27th is yours. And Leo, my darling, you are standing directly underneath it, and the only question is whether you can stand there without apologizing for the light. And on the 12th, when the sky goes dark at midday, do not ask for anything. Put something down instead. 19 days later, on the 31st, we will find out what walks into the space. I am Madame Aurora from Manhattan, and I love you, all 12 signs of the zodiac. I will see you before the eclipse.